In this tutorial video, we create the chin and the muzzle of the cat using colour pencils on a suede matte board. Hi and welcome to part 4 of this series of video tutorials depicting the cat portrait on suede matte board. This is slight overlap with the previous video because there was a real difficult point of where I had to try and break the videos into two sections. So I did briefly start on this chin area in the previous video, but then it was going to make it a 2-hour stint, so I've tried to break this up now to just focus on the chin and the muzzle area, which I believe are probably the more difficult parts on the cat overall. So continuing as we've done on the previous layers, we've worked on the previous previous segment on putting in almost like an outline to this muzzle. So we've done the cheeks, the nose, and then all of that dark recess underneath the chin, and that gives us a shape now to almost fill in. So it's almost like colouring in. It's a bit like I do the eyes. We create the outline, the outer edges of the eyes, and then we fill in that internal space. So that's what we are going to be doing here. So again, we're continuing to use the Caran D'Ache Pablos, and what I've done is I've just sped up this video. It's 2 times speed here at the beginning where we've got the overlap, and then we will go over to real time near the end. Okay, so you'll notice obviously exactly like we did up at the top areas where we've got the brow. We're putting in a light foundation on the lightest area of the fur, just using our white. We are going to be we're going to be using the silver grey. If you look at the right hand side, you're going to be looking at there's some very, very cool areas there, but there's also on the left hand side some warm areas. So we're going to be using again same pencils as before, our white, our silver grey. Those are the coldest of the colours, and then we've got our ash grey and our beige, which are the warmest grey colours, and also we've got the light grey, which is sort of in between the two. It's a bit of a bluey grey. It's not really, really cold, and it's not really, really warm. So going in here, we're just now starting to emphasise how dark that recess of the mouth is. So just using our black in there. And you see I go over it several times. So again, thinking about your pressures. We're not going in there and pressing super hard with one press, you know, of one layer of pencil. We are going in there several times and just building that up as well. I was pleased that the cat didn't fade too much, being left overnight for a couple of days in between the stages of works in progress. But I do, like I say, I do allow then to go right in at the end over a layer of workable fixative to just give a little bit of pop, a little bit of oomph to those lights again, just in case they have faded or been soaked up into the nap of the tooth of that paper, the support. So we've popped in there again some of our indigo blue, which is our purpley shade. So we'll be using it. If you look just underneath the dark area of the mouth, look at your reference, you'll see there again, wherever you can see, same as pastel matte, if you can see dark underneath the lighter fur, we need to pop those darks in, and then we can sharpen our pencils and put the texture of the white fur over the top. And same as well, think about blending your pencils again. So here I'm popping in some of our darker shade. So I'm using there our Bistre again. And if you pop that in underneath, then you can go over the top with your your ash grey or one of your lighter colours, and the two will blend and you'll get a softer, lighter value, a lighter tone of that underlying bistre. So again, it's a case of like push and pull. People say about, well, how do you blend your lights into your darks into your lights? It's exactly as I just said it. You're blending one into the other, so you're going to push your darks up into your lights and you'll pull your lights away into your darks, and you'll keep doing that, one over the top of the other, and you'll end up using your light over the top of your dark last as your final layer, because if you look at the cat, it's a dark undertone where the neck is, and you're flicking the white lightest fur texture over the top of that dark, so that will always be your last. I mean, if a cat had some, if you were flicking dark hair over a light area, you would be doing the reverse. So here, literally really light touches. I'm just extending the outer edge of that mouth out, popping in some of those darks, using that Venetian red again as well. And you'll flick between. You've also got, you can pull in if you need an extra little bit of red in there. We've got that Bordeaux red, which is that lovely pinky, dark, bright red, almost like colour of like rich lips there. It's not like a pillar box red. So touches of that going down. Also here, touch of the, now I've pulled in, this is the dark grey. So undertones of the dark grey going in there. And the dark grey to me is a blue. It's a real greyish mid blue colour, so touches of that one going in there as well, and just keep rotating between. So see there, I put that dark grey, the bluish colour down, but I've gone over the top of it now with my white, and that'll soften it back down. But you'll see we'll just put so many layers. I'm just trying to fill this space with pigment first of all before adding in too much texture. Here I'm just doing a little tester. Again, my pencil isn't super sharp, so it's mainly, I keep it a little bit blunt like this when I'm just trying to get pigment down, to get it to stick to that suede matte surface. If you were going in and your undertone of paper matched the undertone shade of the underlying tone of the cat, then you could leave some blank space there if you wanted. But remember, if you look at your suede matte texture, it's almost like a bokeh effect, like, you know, lots of little circles of the suede matte texture. You don't really want that showing in the cat or in any of your fur work if it's not a true portrayal. So you're sort of working against getting rid, a bit like with Pastelmat, you're getting rid of the tooth. Some of the papers, you're trying to get rid of some of the tooth. Unless it matches the texture of your fur anywhere in your portrait, then you're not trying to embrace the texture of your support, you're trying to eliminate it. And that's a mistake a lot of people make. They don't push their layers far enough so you get the texture of the paper showing through. And say it's a beautifully soft, glossy dog, then you'll have fluffy, bobbly grain showing through, and that doesn't match the texture that you're trying to portray. So always push your layers. Even if you think you've finished your layers, just push it another couple of layers. Suede matte allows you to do that. Pastelmat does, your textured papers usually do as well. It's something, let's say, it comes with time. So here again, I've got a lovely base layer down there now. So now I'm just going in with my white, placing it down, and I'm wiggling. You remember that wiggle stroke we did up on the cheeks? Place your pencil down and wiggle. I just don't know what, again, I've used the short pencil here and I should have put it in a holder, but it's all I'm doing. Pencil down, press, wiggle, and I wiggle and press, increase my pressure until I'm releasing the amount of pigment that I want released there, basically. And then as I come down, if you look at the texture, so if you look just under the mouth area, it's little short, stubbly fur, and then as it starts to come down over the chin, the fur tongue-tied, the chin fur becomes slightly longer, and it starts to head in a direction. At the top of the chin, it's sort of going up and out and forwards as it comes down over that chin, so sort of like an inch or so down, then it starts to go out to one side and forward and down. And it sort of goes down sort of to the bottom left and to the bottom right. So now we've got that chin area covered. I'm going to balance it out and go up and really increase. By putting that chin in, which is quite soft, it's meant now that I really need to increase some of the intensity of that bright highlight in places. So if you notice the bottom in the chin, it's like a central area, just coming up to the top right hand side, it's a bit brighter. And also obviously up on that muzzle area, either side of the nose, on the muzzle, directly below the nose, it's really bright highlight there, and also some of the muzzle itself going out towards where the whiskers begin. So here you go, you see I'm just increasing underneath that chin, that top right hand side, and it'll come down. As I say, there's an area, big chunk just in the middle. And what you'll need to do is, obviously this is the area that might vanish overnight when you leave your piece, so you just go back in and keep intensifying it. See, we're not actually putting in any sort of fur texture really there. We're putting in the short strokes of the fur, but we're still really just building. You can see there now, that last layer I've used extra pressure, pushed a little bit harder. The pigment has now got something to sit on, a nice base, and it's really starting to intensify down there now. So I have to be careful here as well where it meets the edge of, let's call it just the lower chin. Let's call it the lower chin, so it's the upper neck where that dark recess is. We're going to have to make sure we soften that on the left hand side with some of our warm beige and just pull some of that back into the white just to soften it. And same on the right hand side, we might have to make that a little bit darker again. So here we go, exactly as I was just saying. So we're just pulling back in. We've got our beige, but this is the brownish beige as well that we can pull in. And it just softens up and gives that little tiny chin a little bit of prominence as well there. Because remember, think of a bone structure underneath. So here I'm just using that brownish beige just to map back in and give a little bit of shape to the actual chin, because the chin doesn't just go straight down to the neck. There is a bone in there forming the bottom of that jaw, so just always keep that bone structure in mind as you're working. And now I've added some of that brownish beige, I need to darken and pull some of that dark back up into those areas as well. So it's just repeating really what you've already done before and tweaking. Little adjustments. So every time you add a dark in there, it might make your highlight look a little bit shallow, so you need to up your highlight a little bit more, up in your contrast. It's like tweaking those buttons on your monitor or on your TV. If you up the contrast, then you might lose a little bit of colour or a bit of brightness, so you just need to keep going in and just tweaking and making adjustments. So here I've got the ochre, and also you'll have your Venetian red and your hazel around here. But this is the ochre, which is slightly more yellowy colour. And you flick between that and your oranges just to start popping in. If you see, look at where the follicles begin for those whiskers. There's very orangey base in there. I know we've already mapped them in with a very light pressure of our black or our charcoal, but in there as well there is real orangey hints. We've put some tip of that in there now. So now we've got the chin. It's sort of then meant that need to pop in our highlights again. We need to work our way forwards again. Remember, we stopped working on our cheek. We did the outer areas of the cheeks, so the sides of the head, and then we stopped, and then we came down around the underneath that lower chin and got our dark shadows in. So now, before we can work onto the muzzle, because if you look at that muzzle, the muzzle sits in front of those cheeks, especially on that right hand side, which we've sort of tackled, but now we need to start to tweak, get in our highlights, make adjustments as we come down, adding in a little bit of texture there as well, pulling it back in on that right hand side, We'll do the same on the left hand side as well. But we need all of that to be in place to then be able to come forward and start working on our muzzle. So we still will see it's still got on both sides of just the muzzle, we've still got virgin paper or support showing through there. So once we've got all this pigment down, see here we're just dragging and starting to create some of that softness of that fur there of that cheek. We'll break it up. We're just going to be rotating through those colours that we used on the cheeks earlier. So our darks to lights, if we lose any of our colour, we'll pop some of our colour back in. But then we'll need to come up and just start to fill in that virgin space that we've got of suede matte that's visible on the muzzle. Because we're going to need a good layer down on there before we can start to work the detail there. So again, burnt sienna going down there as well. Remember I said about those orangey red bits are in the follicles. So I'm just popping a little bit of burnt sienna in there as well, on top of that ochre that we've already popped in there. That's the lighter of the purples going down there now. That was our aubergine. So little touches of that as we work our way down through. So as always, I start with my darks and come up through my mid-tones. That aubergine is much softer than the dark indigo. The dark indigo is great. Sorry, the indigo blue is really great around the real dark recesses, so just around the mouth. In the dark stripes, the tiger stripes that we identified of the cat itself, the markings. See, now I'm just mapping around that muzzle on the right hand side to give it an outline. Again, just popping in. Everywhere I see, my eyes are just flicking backwards and forwards, literally pencil down. Wherever I see a little dark mark, I'm popping it down. You can soften it. If it goes too dark, you can soften it with that next layer by putting a lighter shade over the top. But as always, you need that dark to be there before you put your lights over the top. By popping in your shadows, remember, if you pop in your shadows, it makes your lights instantly pop forwards. It gives definition. You'll notice this more actually when we come on to working the clumpy fur on the bottom of the cat. That will really, really give some prominence. By sinking the shadow in, it instantly makes gives the rest of the fur some sort of 3-dimension. I mean, I suppose if you wanted to pop your highlights in first, that's great, but you've got to get your shadows in behind them then. So the fur, like I said, the fur when we get to the bottom, the clumpy fur is just going to be shapes to start with, and then a little bit of texture at the end. So very much like we work on pastel matte. So any of you that are using pastel matte, you'll be able to follow along really easily, especially with that bottom layer. So here I've gone in again there with one of my darks. You can use your charcoal if you don't want to go too dark, or your black. And just now pushing in all of those little follicle roots. And every time as well, look, a little adjustment, a little bit more dark down there. Yep, I can push it a bit darker. Let's just put a little bit more down there. So you never ever take a value to its final value with your first 2 or 3 layers. You're always tweaking and adjusting, upping that contrast, upping the detail. So back up here now, increasing that. I'm probably using quite a bit of pressure there, increasing there. You can see how much I'm pressing. It's really, 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 because if you looked at it before, you thought, oh, that's come up quite bright there now, but now I've gone in there yet again with even more pressure and quite a bit of conviction now that, right, we've got our outside shape of that muzzle. Now I'm going to start to just really press in there and flick in. See, whilst I've got that super sharp pencil there as well, I'm just mapping in some of those whiskers as well. So you've got a bit of confidence when you're doing the whiskers. It's literally nice sharp pencil and just press, and you'll see we need to go backwards and forwards on this this mat just to make sure we've got that pigment going down. And then just simply continue to start to fill the area, that virgin area of that muzzle that we needed to get some pigment into. You see how bright that's going down now as well. So I'm using a little bit more pressure. Because I've brought those little two areas there just either side of the nose at the top of the muzzle, because now I've pushed those to quite a nice bright value. I will push them again later on in the portrait near the end, but for now I've increased that quite bright, so I've got a really good, I'm quite happy with how bright I need to take the rest of this now. So I'm just adjusting everything to kind of match that bright tonal value. I wonder how many layers have gone in there if I went back and counted. Lots. So again, just coming down the right hand side there. We're going in there with some darks as well. Doesn't matter if you take it too light, it doesn't mean we can just adjust it. And that white pencil is blending with the Bistre, the Bordeaux red, the Venetian red, the indigo blue, all of those colours that we put down there, it's blending with all of them and softening them. And again, the support, you know, the features of the support, that soft fluffiness, that is aiding us too here. So super sharpened up now, and you'll notice I hold the pencil a little bit differently. See those little stubby marks? Then what I do is I sharpen up the pencil, I raise it up. See here now it's gone flat again, but if I want stubby marks, I raise the pencil up, I raise the bottom end of the pencil up so it's almost vertical as it approaches the support, and then I sort of stab it. So it's like the stippling that we did before. I raise it up, bring the pencil down towards the support and stab away in short little stabbing strokes. Whereas when I'm working on softer fur with some direction, here I'm dropping the pencil down to a more of an angle, or less of an angle, to the support. So the way you hold your pencil makes an effect. You know, you can change the type of stroke that you make, obviously with the pressure, direction, the length of the stroke, whether you press hard at the beginning of the stroke and lift off, and also it's the angle of your pencil as well, so you can go in with your pencil at a different angle, little stabby strokes. There's so many different strokes that you can use to create the different textures, but it's all practice. So again, try not to use the same strokes throughout, because otherwise you're creating pretty much the same texture throughout, and the cat, especially this cat, has got different texture all over it, so you're always going to be using totally different methods all over the cat. So here you can just see I'm rotating through those pencils. I've got that aubergine back in there, I'll pull the indigo blue back in, our burnt sienna will go back in there. It's just anywhere that you start to see here now we need to make this muzzle meet up with that cheek. It is a little bit pronounced, a little bit forward of the cheek on this side, but we're just going to get the outline of it in first of all. See how I said about raising the tip of that pencil? I lifted that bottom tip, the bottom end up at an angle, and as I come down here it comes down at less of an angle to the support, so I can do more flicky away, softer pencil fur strokes. So here I'm rotating, I've got the white and I've also got the silver grey that I'm using up around here. And then anywhere then I've got the warm grey showing, I'll flick over to use the beige for the darker areas, and also the ash grey, which is your warmer grey. Here, really light pressure over here again, it's hardly leaving a mark, it's just starting to get some on the outer edge. I was just starting to gently place some pigment in. So back now with our white, just trying to build up. And then because those, I've created those, the base of the follicle lines, those little dark marks, because I've created those quite intensely, then I will need to break those up a little bit, and also we'll need to pop some colour back in those as well. So some of our hazel, some of our burnt sienna will need to go in and break those up, and also more of the aubergine and our indigo blue coming up, especially on the bottom two stripes of those follicle dots. I really need to know if there's a technical term for those. I'm sure there is, rather than me just making up names for them. So you see there now, we've actually filled in all of that. We took away all the virgin pigment now, and it's filled that space. And now we're going back in. Now that's the Prussian blue. Just to really add a touch more, little dots, little touches now, just to break up. We've slowed all this down now, so we're coming back now, we're in real time. We were in 2 times speed before, and this has now brought it back to real time, so you can see me actually as I'm working. I was working on the portrait. So again, sometimes I'm still keeping my pencil on the support in its back and forth motion, and then other times when I'm creating texture, I'm putting the pencil down, pressing, lifting away, pushing away, and I say creating the first strokes, which are thicker at the base and are much finer as I've lifted away and flicked. Still just blending over the top of some of those darks there, just softening them up. And again, as I'm watching the video, I am still flicking my eyes backwards and forwards to my own reference photo here. Almost like I'm critiquing my own work to make sure I'm following it as I should have been. So yet again, another layer of white pigment going down there. Now I do actually use up here as well, I use my cream, because if you look at your reference, then yeah, your white's providing you a lovely bright white. I have enhanced the white, to be honest. So I've used artistic license and sort of really upped those brightest areas by using a lot of my white. But you'll notice here, the top edges and along that muzzle is quite a creamy colour, so that's why I've used a mix of the cream over the top of the white, just to soften it up on those edges. But again, this comes back to, as we mentioned in the previous videos, how you're viewing your reference, whether you're viewing it through a screen, a printout. It's going to look different to mine, and again, it's whether you've done anything to adjust your own colours and contrasts within the reference photo. It's whether you've edited it a little bit more yourself, which is absolutely fine to do. So you might have injected more colour in there, you might have desaturated it and, you know, taken some more colour out. You might be using a completely different reference photo, but just kind of following along with this technique. So do whatever your eyes are telling you to do. If you see a much creamier, greyer area there, this is the whole thing about, like I say, I keep repeating this, I know, in the videos, but make these tutorials your own. Yep, follow the technique, follow the process, but just tweak it. If you see here, like so I'm going back in there with that burnt sienna in there and just breaking up some of that white, some of that texture now, because it's never ever actually just a black round circle there that the follicle, that the big fat whiskers come out of. There's always usually some colour or something in there, and there is most definitely on this cat, because I can see there now where I'm putting some of that burnt sienna. Yep, great, but I'm going to have to go back in there with the purpley blue as well and add a touch more of that in. To just see now, see I'm slowing down, I'm starting to be a little bit more precise in my placement. Starting to break it all up a little bit. Again, as we look at this on the screen, we are zoomed in quite a lot, so as you step back from the picture, I mean, I'd guess it depends what size screen you're working on, but the cat, let me just have a quick look at the actual portrait. 1, 2, 3. So the cat, the bottom of the chin, where the dark shadow is, up to the top of its head, not the top of its ear, but just the top of its forehead, is 1, 2, 3. It's about 4.5 inches. So depending on what you're viewing this on, I'd imagine the tablet might be slightly bigger than that. And if you're watching it on a TV screen, then yeah, it definitely zoomed in loads. So it's going to look a lot less detailed on a bigger screen. But then when you step back and you see the actual portrait in reality, it looks really detailed. Like I said as well, you can just keep working this. I'm here, I'm just getting some more of that lovely burnt sienna, which is adding some beautiful tones back in now to the shadows. This is really lifting it now. It's just these little touches now, just looking for those colours that we lost earlier on when we were putting in the tonal values. And you can overemphasize them. If you want to put more in than you can actually see, do that as well. There's no right or wrong, unless you're doing a commission for someone and they want you, and your style is to absolutely colour match exactly. Do whatever you like here. Don't put the pressure. Don't put the pressure on yourself to absolutely colour match if you don't want to, if it doesn't feel natural. Obviously, if you do want to colour match, then please do. But make this one yours. I encourage that with everything that I show you how to do. This is just me interpreting this image, doing my version, and giving you guys a head start on what to do if you want to do something similar. Of course, I can't wait to see your versions of this one, because some of you do follow it to a T, which is amazing. I'm terrible. I'd probably go off at a tangent. I know that I need to go back and finish Amber Cat that I started doing on Karen Hull's workshop recently, and I'm not even a third the way through, but I know that I do need to find some time to sit and work on that one, and try and be disciplined and follow. I was trying to be disciplined and follow Karen, but then I was still going off at my own tangent, but using the pencils that Karen told us to use. So I was using her palette, but also even though following her palette, it's just natural that you just, if you're an artist yourself and a pencil artist, you do go off at a tangent. But that's the great thing, and that's why I encourage you all guys to try and follow these tutorials, but do it in your own way. So if you feel like bringing in other colours, making little adjustments, using your own reference photo just to follow the technique, that's what I encourage it. You don't have to do things exactly like me, because otherwise you're sort of copying my style and not developing your own. It helps you developing technique, that's great, but in time, even if you only do the first couple of tutorials following exactly, then the next ones, just try to mix it up a little bit. Use one of the other reference photos that I provide for that month, or even find one of your own, and then just follow along with the techniques. If you need to follow the same colour palette, so say you do use the Black German Shepherd dog tutorial, find a portrait of another black dog or a black animal, use my colour palette if you like, have other colours to hand if you need them, but again, make it your own. So use the tutorials, like I say, as much as or as little as you want. You use them fully, in other words, copy them start to finish, or just interpret them and use parts of them. So either use the colour palette range if you're struggling to see your colours, use them for the technique for certain fur types, just to do the eyes. Like I say, a lot of you are waiting to do for the final part of this video, which is the clumpy body fur. Or like I say, or use the whole thing. It is your tutorial to do whatever you like with. So see here now, I've just picked up one of my darks and I'm starting now to break up those the base of those follicles where the whiskers are. So just really enhancing in and around the base points there. Just feeling my way, and again here starting to put in some of those whiskers. So I'll flick some of, if you look closely, some of them do start with a dark line and then they will blend into your brighter white lines. So again, we'll do a little bit more on the whiskers later on, but that's all I'm doing, is they're just starting to map them in and starting to break up some of that texture around the base follicle lines of the main whisker hairs. So you'll see here, and I also flick between using my dark, I'll use that silver grey there, I'll also use the brownish beige, and of course the white for the brightest highlights of the whiskers. And again, they don't have to be exact to the reference image here. You can see I've just got distracted now and thought, oh, I haven't put those little flicky whiskers up over the top of the eyebrows, so I've just stopped and flicked those back in as well. And whilst I'm there, let's make a few adjustments on the ears. That's just the kind of thing I do. Let's say you're always tweaking and adjusting as you work your way down through the piece. And that's why I'm just, like I've mentioned before, I'm not one for taking an area, so like an ear, I don't take it to 100% completion on the first round. I always leave it and I'll come back and I'll tweak it a little bit, and then right at the end we do our top to toe so we can balance everything again. It just allows us to do that as well. I just find otherwise if you bring an ear to completion, then time you get to the bottom of the picture, who's to say that it balances? So you always, I feel, need to go back in and just balance the whole piece. Especially if you're working on it over several days or a couple of weeks, your mood could change. Yes, if this is your first time as well using the suede mat, you're going to feel more confident by the time you get to the bottom of the piece than you were when you started out up at the top on those ears and eyes. So definitely give yourself some sort of allowance that you can go back in and make those adjustments right at the end. So here now I've got that brownish beige, I'm just using it there just to soften some of those whisker lines down as well. If you want to do your whiskers using a different method, if you want to use your titanium white from brush and pencil, you can do that at the end using a brush. You can use acrylic, you use ink. I use a mix of the pencils as I go along. And again, we'll come in and we'll do more work on the whiskers later on as well. So we're coming up to the end of this part 4 of the tutorial. So again, just little tweaks now with that burnt sienna, some of our darks, and we'll come back and we can work on this a little bit more as well once we've done that bottom part of the cat, which is what we're going to move on to now. But that is pretty much it. It's sort of less is more as well. It's not taken exact to the photo, but it's given the impression of that soft muzzle and those whiskers. So this is the end of part 4. Thank you very much for watching. I'll leave you with a scan of where we're up to, and please, if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe or give me a thumbs up. Thank you.